There was a little card play to end the last turn, turn 7 over there. The Greeks had a traitor card that allowed them to force to steal a card from the East. The East only had one card left, SX. They played that to prevent it. So they just negated each other there. Great. And I don't know if that was legal or if you have to play your cards during your turn. I think you're allowed to play them I don't know, at some point or another, but certainly there would have been an opportunity at a different point to do so. Although it may not have left both players with no cards. One player might have had a card afterwards. I'm not going to worry too much about the specifics of the rules in a game of this type. I don't feel like they're actually that important, to tell you the truth. So, piles and piles of money for the East. Counted up troops. The East has, I don't remember, something like 14 or 15 heavy infantry units, maybe more than that. Somewhere under 20, though, and they have well more over 20 civ points. They have like 28, I think, and more coming as they build more and more, as they rebuild more and more of these towns that they've wrecked. They rebuilt both Athens and Rome last turn. At the end of their turn, I had skipped it over again. I'm playing a little loosely here, as I usually do. The Greeks, however, have no civ points, so their one heavy infantry dropped their stability down to the lowest level. Remember, it doesn't fall off the map or anything. That's just a rule I made for the Romans to try to knock them out of the game so that other people would pay a penalty for not generating victory points. Well, I don't think that matters much either. And now we're at a point where, well, the Greeks have a total of $9. Assuming they won at 4 actions, they could build 2 heavy infantry and a light. That's it. They could build more and try to take Athens back, but this big old army is going to come down and knock them out. There's almost no question about that. There is very, very little. The combat system seems very random. Hey, you roll 2 dice and it's 10% on each side. But the truth of the matter is, unless they're really evenly matched, not just force size, but, when you start taking everything into account, the cavalry, the leadership, etc., it's actually not all that random. It's very random if you're close. Hey, neither of us has a modifier, and 50% of your army is destroyed and 10% of mine is destroyed. That's a big difference. On the other hand, if you outnumber 2, 3 to 1, you're getting a few modifiers there, you're going to be able to turn it. That seems like, okay, 2 to 3 to 1, that's a pretty big deal. Yeah, it is. But it is also very possible to get there. We have right now, there's no limit to the army size. You're going to see, this is not going to grow any. This is not going to grow any. The East is going to have to build its armies elsewhere. They're going to have a slight problem. They're only going to have 1 leader on the board. So they have to choose which force they want. It's going to be this one. But, it's not something that the Greeks can put up a fight against. And we've seen that again and again in the game where one person is able to get the jump on the other person. The hidden deployment definitely affects that as well. But, when you have the East and Greece allied against Carthage, you had a situation where the East was able to focus all of its troops on one prong, the Greeks on another prong, and Carthage had to try to decide, how to divide their forces up to fight a 2-front war. You're not going to pull a rabbit out of your ass in that case. It's that simple. You're not able to do it. Not if the forces are approximately equal. Now, if Carthage had been significantly better than its 2 foes, they might have been able to beat one back while holding the other one off just by having a big enough force in the area of the other one to keep from losing much ground. But as it stands, nah. This is pretty much over at this point. All right, well, I get to buy troops and place new leaders. And after we set that up, Greeks they had to get rid of their militia, I forgot about that. But they built themselves 3 new heavy infantry, so they've got a stack of 4 there. That leaves them $3. Some actions. They may be able to take Athens back if they get really, really lucky without a leader there, etc. The East, in a sense, didn't want to build anything, but they built themselves a couple more heavy infantry here, just to, I don't know, just in case things go really, really wrong. At least they've got some garrison back here to cope with. Maybe they can grab Thrace or something that way. Their goal right now is to destroy Greece, to take the rest of the Greek territories, including perhaps the Aegean Islands. But those don't matter. They don't produce heavy infantry, so there's not going to. In fact, you can't even recruit there. So that's going to be less important than taking the mainland areas of Greece with the heavy infantry. But if they can cut off Greece for the most part, actually, if they can cut this line, that pretty much guarantees all this back here doesn't produce for the Greeks. As it stands right now, the Greeks are still connected enough that they're able to get income, and if you cut off several of their bucks up here, that would make it an even worse situation for them. But as it stands, they're pretty much hosed. Well, let's finish off their death. The initial Seleucid attack swings in and grabs pretty much everything. They probably could have pushed in and made the attack against those infantry, but they're fine letting them make an attempt on the city if they want to try to wear themselves out there. That'll just weaken them and make it even easier. It opens up some possibility, but not much. Well, the Greeks actually did fairly well down here. They're down to just 1 strength point plus their militia. They built up, ended up with 4 points of militia. Taking losses, hey, it doesn't hurt their stability. For their card draw, they drew a stability check, which is going to be a civil war for Carthage, which means, I don't know, bunches of Carthaginian units stop being Carthaginian and become barbarians or something, I don't know. There aren't a lot of units, though. And they end up with a leader back at their capital, which of course can't happen. So they just end up in kind of even more disarray than they're in. Kind of a shame because they had an elite leader. Somebody stumbled in there, or maybe something would happen. But the Greeks failed to take the city, and now they're pretty much ready to be steamrollered by the Seleucids there. Oh well. Greeks got the next turn, and it forced me to look up the roll because the Seleucids were holding this mercenaries card in their hand, and they chose to play it as the Greeks entered the city, if they could, and it turns out they can. Which does not ensure that you could play cards or not outside of anybody's activation, as I did. Probably the answer should be no, but whatever. But you certainly can play them to raise up extra troops just as you need them, which can add a little bit of surprise and interest to the game, I guess. Something that I feel is largely been lacking. And some of them, the interceptions in play, etc., those all make sense too. So there's definitely a little bit of this, I got this card ready for you in hand. Anyway, the Greek militia hit, and there was still a heavy infantry there. So when they took damage on their first blow, they only got to attack twice, low roll. When they took damage on their first roll, they were pushed back, and then they made another, do at least one leader loss check. I'm always forgetting to do this. They were able to make another attack with more troops, actually, against the Seleucids, but they still haven't taken the city, and they're weak enough that they should fall to that. They're out of money, so they will not be playing any more actions. They've gotten, what, 2? Yeah, that's all they got. They bid some money on their first siege assault. They lost the bid there, and then since then the Seleucids have been able to bid a buck on everything, essentially, and be able to take the +1, the modifier, on every single siege, which has been a definite penalty against the Greeks, making it harder for them to take the city. Okay, well, let's take a look at what happens to Carthage. They got the just recent chip. They wouldn't normally get an activation, but they get a bonus because of the stability check card that was played against them. Well, maybe not. So each space, on odds, they're going to lose half their stuff. But a garrison will go there if they don't lose it. All their leaders go away, and their stability goes back up to -1. Alright, that's not going to hurt them much. What does it mean if they lose half of a garrison? I don't know. I don't think they can have an effect. So let's see. Do they have anything that's not a garrison? They do right there. Odd, they're going to lose half their forces. Great. And this guy goes away because they have to lose at least half, so there'll be, I don't know, one dude left as their forces continue to disintegrate, and it means nothing. Okay, great. Well, I was hoping that would be a little bit more interesting there. Clearly, though, you can see what kind of effect that would have rolling for all your forces that are in the field and getting your leader recalled and a new one placed in your capital. You can see what kind of effect that would have on somebody who's conducting a campaign. It doesn't mean anything just because Carthage doesn't mean anything right now. And Carthage, or the Seleucids, spent their turn chasing the Greeks up here. Even with cav advantage, the Greeks were able to slip away a couple of times, but then they're wiped out. And now with a secondary move into the Aegeans, all that's left of Greece is the Peloponnesus itself, which is still under their control. That doesn't count for anything because of this town. Now, if the Seleucids can get even one unit into here, and they could just sail in there with one, they capture it because it's not defended. Its wall is breached, and that's the end. And as far as I'm concerned, I got the stability and opportunity through an extra chip into the thing. It's over here. There is no point in playing out anymore. There is no Greek army. The Greeks have no more activations. There's just no chance of anything happening. The only possibility is something horrible coming out of the deck that I have no idea possibly even exists, that resurrects a power so that maybe I have to hunt it down a little bit more. But the last chance was really, could the Greeks take Athens back and maybe delay this out a little bit longer? It was guaranteed to end this turn, though, I think. Looking back on this particular play, some definite issues. Somebody brought up, I erred. I should not have used my Romans to attack the Greeks right away. They gained nothing out of it, and Pyrrhus was able to march in and had an easier time handling the Romans because of it. And that definitely affected the whole tenor of the game, because once Rome was hurt that badly, although they might have gotten hurt that badly by Pyrrhus himself anyway, Carthage was able to go in and handle them fairly easily. And then it became a three-player game and fell into this kind of dynamic. One player's ahead, let's gang up on him. It took a while to get there, right? Because the nature of the alliance system for this game, the fact that you have to actually draw the correct card in the advanced game. Now, in the basic game, a player can simply spend their action on declaring that they're going to form that alliance. But in the advanced game, it becomes even more difficult to create an alliance. Now, it doesn't cost you anything in the advanced game except a card that, if you're Carthage, you could use to raise mercenaries. But yeah, that definitely interfered with things. Also, I know that I made some errors not getting militia maybe when I needed to, when I was able to. Maybe a couple of other little issues here and there. But overall, I feel like I got a fair idea on the game, and well, I'll come back and come back with a review. But it definitely does feel like the kind of game where, when an alliance is really settled on. So, if Carthage and the East had gone after Greece as they initially were, Greece would have been knocked out. The problem with that was it was apparent that Carthage would win that fight in the end. What was not apparent was in this fight whether Greece or the Seleucids would come out ahead. So both sides threw and went all in against Carthage and took Carthage out by the time that the dust was starting to settle. Well, it didn't have to completely settle, but by the time the dust was starting to settle, it was too late. And things were beginning to show. It was too late for Greece to back out and say, hey, Carthage, I can help you. No, the Seleucids had already taken the capital, had cut Carthage to shreds, and it did not look like the Greeks had any way of resisting the East from then on. Whether or not they did something with Carthage, it didn't really make a difference anymore. And that's where we ended up here. Ending a little early, Sure, we could play the rest of it out. It's not like Carthage and Greece aren't going to still get victory points because they still have a presence on the board, but it's of no interest. The East is in the lead in victory points, and no one else is going to ever get a turn. All right, up it goes.